Converted Man here. Okay, objects of the mind. In brief. All right, so letters, numbers, musical notes, words, concepts. These are all objects of the mind. So 1, 2, 3, ABC, musical note, Jar Jar Binks, God, tree, all objects of the mind, which are separate and independent of whatever reality actually really is. So, yes, there is a tree out there that you are calling tree, and that tree will still be there before, after, and after you are gone, more than likely. But the word tree is dependent upon a mind to produce it and to communicate it. So that's what object of the mind is in brief. Let me show another thing here if it will. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's do that. Okay. Here we go. All right. All right. So, yeah, there's this thing out there in the real world. Your brain processes it through your senses, and you label it, in this case, tree. So if there wasn't a brain there to label it, then that label is gone. The real world object persists despite that label being gone. So that is what an object of the mind is. It is simply the label that we are attaching to the physical object. Now, some labels do not have physical objects. All right. So then this gets, a little bit complicated. Wikipedia has a decent enough article on what the object of the mind is and the distinction between different versions of them, and how all that works, and it goes into greater detail. And then there is another website, link in the description, that goes over the philosophy of knowledge from perception, which is kind of basically what I'm talking about here when I'm talking about objects of the mind. So this is direct realism, is essentially the philosophy that I'm kind of adhering to, although I think I'm probably combining it with indirect realism. And then there's also idealism. But at any rate, so the external world, what do I think about that? Do I think it's mind independent, or do I think it's mind dependent, which is the last one? No, I do not think it's mind dependent. I think that the external world exists without my mind, so therefore it's either one of these philosophies has to be mine. So the perception method, is it direct or is it indirect? Well, I think it's pretty much direct. I think that there's some room for indirect as well, though. And then it says, here's the problems with these philosophies. In direct realism, you've got all these problems. In indirect realism, you have one problem. And in idealism, you have a number of problems. But I don't see skepticism as a problem. I see that as a benefit. But nonetheless, direct realism then continues to explain what that means, what the view is. The external world exists independently of the mind. We perceive the world directly through our senses. What you see is what you get. You see the tree, that's what you perceive. So these different philosophies are deeper ways of understanding object of the mind. But all that's really needed to understand what I mean, and hopefully what others mean when they talk of objects of the mind, is that the thought is a reality that is completely dependent on the mind. That if there wasn't a mind, that simply wouldn't be. So numbers, letters, words, labels, these things wouldn't be without a brain to conceive them. But yes, there would still be an actual reality out there. So you can check out that website and go into more detail with it. Okay. This is all hopefully to answer a question that was asked by Fishhead Salad on my last Must-Seen video. And so I'll just highlight that question and I'll attempt to answer his question, and hopefully that will then, be the final cap to this brief explanation of objects of the mind. And I'm sure there's other videos that you could find about this, and perhaps better explanations out there than mine. This is something that just to me, it's like it's intuitive. I just understand it for whatever reason. I don't know, but that's just how my brain works. So, um, do numbers, quantities exist in the mind or in reality? So now, of course, reality, it's like, yes, everything is real. Okay, let's find a new way. Let's find a way to label things in a way that's not gonna cause us problems. So we'll say objects of the mind and objects of the mind that are also outside of the mind, differentiating it in that way, perhaps. So, objects of the mind, do numbers, quantities exist in the mind? Yes, they exist as objects of the mind. And because your mind exists in reality, you have a mind, you have a brain, then yes, they exist in reality. Do they exist independent of the mind? Well, some people think so. I don't. I don't think that out there is a number that you can find in the universe. Plato does think that. Other philosophers have thought this. I personally don't. So I don't think that somewhere in the universe you could find the number one. You might find a thing that looks like the number one, but it's not one. It's not the number one. It's not a thing that's made out of just the number one. Because I don't think something like that really exists. It could. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I don't believe that. So that's my answer to this question, is that they exist in as objects of the mind. So quantities or numbers can only exist because we came up with them. We humans invented them, and for now we're ignoring the possibility of other alien intelligence out there in the universe. We're just pretending that we're it. Hopefully not, because goodness gracious, you know, I hope not. So, yes, it exists in the mind, and because your mind exists in reality, it exists in reality. But what we're meaning here is the objects of the mind exist in a different way than objects that are separate from the mind. Okay. Does math exist in reality or the mind? Is the same answer to the first question. Yes, but no, math only works inside of the mind. It only works as a concept that we humans have come up with. So, we've come up with the symbol. The we've come up with the unit one. We've come up with the symbol that means plus, and we've come up with the unit one, and then we go, okay, we've also come up with another symbol that we call equals, and then we come up with another unit that is then the answer to the question at hand, and we say, okay, a unit and a unit is equal, that's 2 units. And you could say, well, why is it that way? Because that's what we decided. We could have had it be a different symbol completely, and we could have said this unit and this unit equals that, That could have been what we said. We could have said ampersand plus ampersand equals dollar. We all know that. Come on now, it's silly. You know, you learn that in first grade, kindergarten, whatever. And that could have been how we do it. And then you would have been like, okay, ampersand, dollar, I don't know, carat. That's your new number system now. And when I was younger, when I was a kid, we used to do like, that a letter would equal a number. So you'd have like, oh, I want to do a code. And so you'd put out a numbers and then you'd be like, oh, what's that? Well, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, E. So this would be E, A, E, E. Yeah, that's what I just spelled. I don't know what that means, but at any rate, it's coded because I put it into numbers. Yeah, so of course, yeah, yes, lovely penis, great. Okay, so that's all in the mind. It exists. We can write it down, but it 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 only is a thing because our brain makes it possible. Lions know that number exists when they look at a herd of zebras. Well, I don't know the psychology of lions. When a lion, I don't even know if lions actually see the herd of zebras. Um, the fact that zebras have lines is because it makes it harder for them to be spotted when they're in a herd running together. It's like it's one big object. The lion can only pick out a single zebra, and that zebra has to stand out from the herd. So this is actually something interesting. I remember reading at some point that the scientists had tried to track zebras by putting a red dot on them, and those zebras wound up getting eaten by the lions every time. And they were like, "Oh, we're making it identifiable." So it's like it can't be noticed by the lion unless it's noticeable. So I don't know that they know that the numbers exist or don't. I have no idea if other animals are able to think in that way or not. I do not know. Um, uh, I don't know if they understand quantity or not. I have no idea if that's the case. It may very well be the case. I simply do not know. I do not know enough about lions to tell you one way or the other. But regardless, if they did understand quantity, then that still exists in their mind. It still is something that is a concept that they have come up with and would not exist if their mind didn't exist. So, on a side note, I cannot think of a single fictional villain that I hate. Okay, well, and this is, of course, well, there is a fallacy here, and I'll point it out. Not that he's doing it deliberately, or he probably doesn't even, so, but okay, so I can't think of a single example of X. That might very well be true, but that doesn't mean anything, because what you're saying is an appeal to personal incredulity. I can't come up with the solution for this. Therefore, it's true, or therefore it's false. Now, I don't think that he's doing that here, but this is a potential for that particular fallacy. Again, I'm not accusing Fishhead of doing that fallacy. I'm trying to make us all aware that the statement of I can't think of an example could maybe lead you into the fallacy of personal incredulity, and to be aware of that. It doesn't here, thankfully, it doesn't do that here. Um, uh, but the idea, is, you know, okay. So any rate, he doesn't commit that fallacy. Okay. Yeah. Um okay, when you see something, does it exist in your mind as well? Why is it only one way? Why can't I take the things from my mind and refine them? Is it God's fault I can't do that? Yes, when you see something that is actually there to be seen, it is in your mind's eye. It is a concept that you are holding. This gets into either philosophy or neurology or both, depending on or psychology, depending on which direction you want to take that. But yeah, so if you're looking at the screen, you see the avatar of nerdy rodent that's a rodent. Okay, well that exists in your mind. It also exists on the screen. If you close your eyes, it's still there. Um, you know, now of course, we have people that are blind. They you would have to try to describe to that person the creature of the rodent on the screen. And well, they've never seen colors, so how do you describe color? Well, I don't know. It's a difficult conundrum. But even though they can't see it, it's still there. Now, it's nothing for them to touch, though. They can't touch your avatar. And so it's like, okay, well, it lacks a physical characteristic. They can't smell it. They can't taste it. They can't hear it. The only thing that they could do is something they can't do because they don't have sight. They're a blind person, so they can't see the avatar. So you have to describe the avatar, the picture, to them as best as you could. And so then that forms in their head some sort of, well, it's not a picture because if they've never seen, they formulate that differently than I would or that you would. And the way that we both think of things in our head is probably different than each other. Some people think in terms of visual objects, some people think in terms of words. Everyone has a different way of thinking. So yeah. um as far as why you can't take the thing in your mind and make that real, well, that's just not how things work. You can think about a milkshake, and a milkshake is real, but you can think about it all you want, and it won't become real unless you go get a milkshake. You have to either make one yourself or go buy one. Well, you have to buy the materials to make it, so you have to buy something at some point, or you steal the materials, or you have the cow, and and but you have to pay for those resources. Whatever, you have to do something to get the thing that you want. You can't just pretend it into existence, because that's not how reality works, which is the big objection to the ontological argument for God, which is that, well, you can conceive of God, and if you can think about God, then God has to exist. And you go, what? No, that's not how things work. And the argument is ridiculous because it says, well, it's the greatest conceivable thing. And it's like, okay, and well, isn't it better for something to exist than not exist? I don't know. And then it leaps off of the idea that existing is better than not existing, so therefore it has to be real, because that would be the greatest thing that you could be, is a thing that's the greatest thing and it exists. And I go, no, I can think of something better. I can think that the greatest thing that could exist would be something that would let us know that it existed and it's real. And that thing isn't a thing, so this whole thing doesn't work. You can't just pretend things into existence. Or the greatest pizza would exist, and I would have it and I don't. Or I could just imagine that I have all this piles of money and then boom, I'd have all these piles of money. It just doesn't work like that. It's not how reality works. Why? I don't know. That's just how it is. Mom told me that dreams can come true. Well, you have to work at it. You have to make it. Like, you see people say, "I'll pray for you," or I'm praying for a job or whatever, and I'm only taken back to this guy. I remember this guy in church, like, offer praise and whatever, and this one person say, "I've been out of work for 10 years and I found, or 20 years or whatever it was, and I finally got a job. God finally came through." And I was like, even then, when I was a Christian, I was like, my word, what took so long? I was like, but it was all he was doing was praying to God for a job. Did he tell anybody else that he needed a job, perhaps along the way? Maybe somebody, was he looking for a job? Was he applying to different places to work? Was he going to places say, "Hey, I'll work. Can you give me money? I'll mow your lawn. I'll whatever." Or was he just hoping that he'd get a job? And it took 20 years because eventually somebody realized, hey, this poor schmuck needs a job. I guess I'll give him one out of pity. Because they noticed that he needed one and they didn't want him to starve to death. Is that how he got that job? Maybe. And then he attributes it to prayer because he didn't do anything. He just sat there hoping that it would happen. And because somebody noticed and did something, then it did happen. But if nobody came along, he'd still be out of a job. And then there's this saying, God helps those who help themselves. Well, God appears to only help people that do it themselves. So then why are you bothering with the God? If it's out there and it cares a bit for you, then it already knows you need a job. So you might as well not even ask it for one. You might as well do the work on your own to go find the job or whatever it is you need to do. So, yeah. All right. Anyways, so that's objects of the mind in brief. Hopefully, I explained it well. Hopefully, everybody understands. Probably not. And we all await the yin yang comment that will make us all confused as we read it and try to understand what the bleep he's talking about again, like he left like the last 5 times or whatever. And that's fine. We welcome that here. We're glad. Hey, and then now it's time for me to ask Nerdy Reddit to make my face into 3D like he did with his mouse. Make me a 3D face mouse, not into a mouse. Make me a lobster. And then he won't do it because, I don't know, it's probably really hard to do that. Do it anyways, Roar. I want a 3D face. Make me a 3D face. Okay. Thanks for watching. And stay skeptical. All right. That's it.